We're so honored to have you here.
It's good to be here.
Good to be here.
We're previewing the Rick's I Shouldn't Be Selling These Guitars guitar sale.
You have got some amazing instruments I have been looking at, and I'm sure each one of them has a story that we'll...
Yeah, we'll talk about them. We'll talk about it. Maybe we should start with how I first encountered George and because it tells a lot about guitars and why we're even here and taking part in this.
Please.
I, at some point in the, I think it was probably early in the 70s, probably 71 or 2, I'm just guessing, but in that approximate time period, I decided for some reason I wanted a Gibson Explorer. I wanted a Gibson Explorer and I couldn't find one anywhere, and so I called up Gruen Guitars in Nashville, spoke with George, and I told him what I wanted, and he said, you know, I have one, but he said, you might not want it because it's got this funny headstock on it. It's not right. It's not like an Explorer is supposed to look. So I said, well, I mean, I can't find one anywhere else. I might as well buy it from you. So I bought it from George and played it on a bunch of times. I mean, you can see pictures of me all over the place playing that Explorer with a V headstock. I probably played it on stage with Led Zeppelin at that show. A lot of concerts had me playing that guitar. But because the headstock was in the shape of a V, it wouldn't stay in tune for crap. It didn't matter how cool the guitar was or how cool it looked, it wouldn't stay in tune. And there was not much I could do about that. So I tried and tried, I played it, and I just still, it won't stay in tune. So I decided that I'll sell it. So George sold it to me in those days for $1,500. So I said, this guy was interested in buying it, and I said, well, how much will you pay me for it? He said, I'll give you $15,000 for it. Well, I said, that's a pretty good deal. I mean, I bought it for $1,500, now I'm selling it for $15,000. Well, it turns out this guy had one of the world's biggest guitar collections, and he immediately had it appraised at $150,000. So I went, wow, maybe I shouldn't have gotten rid of that guitar. So a few years after that, I got a call from a guy that said, I've been offered this guitar for sale. It's an Explorer, and you supposedly owned it. So I just want to check out the credentials, and I want to make sure everything's cool. Did you really own this guitar and stuff? And I told him, yeah, it was mine, and yep, you know, you can see the pictures of me playing it all over the place. And that definitely was my guitar. And knowing that it was appraised at $150,000 now, I said, do you mind me asking how much are you supposed to pay for this? How much is he asking you for it? And the guy said, well, I'm going to take out a second mortgage on my house because I think it would be something to leave my kids. You know, after I'm gone, I could leave this to them. I said, well, how much is that he's asking? Well, he's asking $250,000. So I said, wow, that's pretty good. I sold it for $15,000, and now you're telling me you're going to buy it for $250,000. So I wasn't totally happy about that. And the next thing I heard was he went ahead and bought it, and he then had it appraised and insured at $1 million. Well, I went ahead to find out. Here's the kicker. When I was a kid at 9 years old, I lived in Indiana, and my dad thought, well, Kalamazoo, Michigan isn't that far away.
Right.
It might be good for us to actually go up and visit the Gibson guitar factory. And so I can remember, because I was an impressionable young guitar player, I remember walking into the Gibson guitar factory, and the first thing I saw was they had in a plexiglass case on the right-hand side, they had two guitars. They had one which is called the Flying V, and they had one which is called the Explorer. And they were both in this case. It said the guitars of the future, I think it said. But I can remember remarking to my dad, I said, you know, the funny thing is, though, that one with the V headstock should be on the one Flying V. It should be on, that would artistically, to me, even as a little kid, I said that would make more sense. Well, it turns out that the reason it's appraised at so much money and the reason that they've all gotten those appraisals to go through, it was the first one that Gibson ever made, and that's why it had the V headstock. It was the prototype for the Explorers. And so the one I saw in that case at 9 years old was the guitar that I bought from George for $1,500 that's now appraised at $1 million. So it's an amazing thing. And I'm only saying that to show you guys that these guitars here that I'm selling in the Rick's, I shouldn't be selling these guitars guitar sale, whatever we're asking for them, you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
We don't know really the entire history. I can tell you, we'll talk a little bit about each one. But even though I know my historic story about them, in the end, you never really know what the real value is going to be until sometime later on when it proves to be that value.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Now, how did you get started? Did you come from a musical family?
well, not totally. My mom sang, and her brother played guitar.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't heard him play too much, but I remember once as a little kid him coming into our kitchen, and he plugged in a little amp and plugged in his guitar and started playing. And I was so emotionally affected by real music, not recorded stuff, not records and stuff.
Yeah.
Somebody actually sitting there in front of you and playing music.
Mm-hmm.
It affected me enough that when I was 8, I asked for my own guitar. I said, get me a guitar, please. Thank you. If you can, Christmas, whatever you want to call it, my birthday, I'd love to have a guitar. So I got my guitar when I was 9 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And my uncle, who played guitar, showed me a little bit. And my mom taught me and my brother both how to sing harmony when we were just little kids. She worked at Westinghouse. She wound electric motors at night to make ends meet. And on the way to work, when we'd drive with her, she would teach my brother and I how to sing harmony. And then my uncle, like I said, was a guitar player, so he taught me the first stuff. He didn't teach me the first thing. My dad was a brave guy. We lived in a little town called Union City. At that time, Fort Recovery, Ohio, was a little town in Ohio where we lived. It only had a few people. It had a Ford garage, though. And the first night I had my guitar, my dad remembered that somebody had told him that the mechanic at the Ford garage played guitar. So he called up this guy. He found his number in our little phone book, and his name was Gene Feely. He called up Gene Feely that night, first night I had my guitar, and he said, I heard you play guitar. Would you mind showing my son something on the guitar? And Gene said, well, bring him on over. Let's give it a shot. What the heck? And so my dad took me over there the first night I had my guitar, and Gene showed me a couple things, probably a real song, actually. He probably showed me how to play a song, a chord song with chords, and I went home and played it immediately. I mean, I'm truly blessed.
Yeah.
I was sitting with a bunch of musicians, guitar players one night, and I told them, you don't really realize how we are blessed. People study and study and study and practice and practice and practice, and in most cases they never have the talent that God gave us, the people at that table. And he certainly gave me that because I played immediately. My uncle then played, he showed me a couple things on guitar. within weeks I had a repertoire of 4 or 5 songs that I could play instrumentally on guitar. I still didn't sing. Singing came later as a vehicle to play the guitar.
Yeah.
But I immediately had 4 or 5 songs, and I went and jammed one afternoon with my uncle at a place where he was playing, and on Sunday afternoons little kids could come into this because it was a bar. But I played my little repertoire of 3 or 4 songs, and we passed the hat, and I made $43. Well, this was in 1956.
That's big money.
I couldn't believe it. I loved playing guitar, and I now could play guitar, and somebody'd give me $43 for doing it. I said, this is heaven here on earth. So I haven't stopped. I'm still doing it. Whatever age I am, it doesn't matter. I'm going to do it. Ringo told me once, he said, I'm going to play drums as long as I can hold 2 pieces of wood in my hand and hammer on them. I'm going to play drums. Well, I feel like that about the guitar.
That's right.
As long as I'm allowed and able physically to do it,
Yeah.
I'm going to do it.
That's right. That is right. Let me ask you, in the I know some of the early folks that you were influenced by were like Scotty Moore,
Yeah.
and James Burton.
James Burton. Scotty Moore certainly was the more cryptic of those 2 names. We just said cryptic because Scotty Moore played on all those old Elvis things, and he played great guitar. He played great rock and roll guitar. And that certainly affected me, and I loved listening to Scotty Moore. But when James Burton came along, he was playing the smoothest version of rock guitar at that time that I had ever heard. So I became a big James Burton fan, and in the last 10 years or so, I've gotten to know James a little bit, and it turns out he's a big fan of mine. So that was one of my biggest compliments I've ever gotten, was hearing James Burton say that he was a big fan of mine. Another one was from Duane Allman.
Yeah.
The McCoys played at a club in Miami. I think it was called The Image in those days. And Duane Allman, I don't think they were called the Allman Brothers at that time yet, but they were like the regular band at The Image. And the McCoys, I had this little guitar with some kind of a Supro-ish instrument that I had hand painted and raised the strings up so I could play slide guitar on it. And I didn't play the slide guitar like I learned later on from Johnny, but I played I played slide guitar. And Duane Allman told me later on that night he had heard me play in the McCoys, and I played that slide guitar, and he said that was what influenced him to become a slide guitar player and to learn to play the slide guitar. So that was another great compliment that came from people. So it's just, music is the great language.
Yes.
I like to call it. We can we can lie. Language allows us to lie. But music, I'm sorry, music doesn't.
Yeah.
You can't lie with music.
Yeah. Right. Exactly right. Exactly right.
So it's the language I feel comfortable with.
Now, when you some of your early successes were, of course, Hang On Sloopy.
Yep.
How did that come to be?
Well, Hang On Sloopy.
How old were you when Hang On Sloopy got big?
I was 17 when it first the incident, we'll call it, happened, and then I was turned 18 by the time we recorded it. Yeah. My little band, the McCoys, came about because I really needed to play guitar. And so my brother, Randy, became the drummer, and so we played drums and guitar, and we'd play at local little functions and stuff. But I had a neighbor come up to me, and he said, if I can talk my parents into buying me a bass guitar, would you show me how to play it? I went, I've never played bass guitar before. But yeah, I'll show you how to play it. You get that bass guitar, I'll show you how to play it. Well, a few weeks later, he knocked on my door, and his parents had bought him a brand new Fender jazz bass in flamingo pink with a brand new Bassman amp with that beautiful old Tolex covering they used to call it.
Yeah.
So he was set up. So I went home and went like, wow, now I have to show him how to play something. So we didn't have a band name or anything because we weren't a band yet. But the first, I pulled out my Ventures album. They did Walk, Don't Run.
Walk, Don't Run.
And
Yeah.
certainly I was into all kinds of guitar music, and I had the Ventures album at home. And I found the easiest song on their album to play, and it turned out to be a song called The McCoy. Mm-hmm. And so I went and showed my neighbor how to play that song on the bass. And then in my garage, right there, we were a real garage band. We actually played with the door open and faced out into the street to our neighbors. But we played that one song, the only song we knew. But we played that song, and we were just so struck by the fact that all of a sudden we were a band. We were actually a band. So we said, wow, if we called ourselves the McCoys, we'd actually have a theme song. So that's how we became the McCoys.
Yeah.
And then time went on, and that bass player went ahead to become a dentist. Mm-hmm. And I needed a bass player. So I had heard about in my local hometown, this kid, this guy that was my bass player previously was from a well-to-do family. They were able to buy him a bass and nice, beautiful equipment and stuff like that. But he didn't really have much of an aptitude toward it. I'd still have to show him what to play. Mm-hmm. And we were playing gigs. Mm-hmm. But we could only play the songs in our gigs that I had been able to show him that he'd been able to play. So we had a limited repertoire, we'll call it. Mm-hmm. And so when he left, all of a sudden I was left without a bass player. And I heard about this kid in our local town, and he had come from the wrong side of the tracks. He was from a single mom. They lived in an old school trailer, which was, really a ramshackle place, and couldn't afford anything. And he had found Dan Electro guitar in the junkyard. Mm-hmm. And he took the outside 2 strings off that guitar and tuned the middle 4 down low so that it became a bass guitar. Mm-hmm. And he had wanted to play in the bass guitar the same way I had wanted to play the guitar. Mm-hmm. And so I got together, called him up, and sat down, played some music with him, and I found that he could play every one of the Motown songs at that time. He was just a fabulous bass player as a kid. Mm-hmm. And his name was Randy Joe Hobbs. Mm-hmm. So Randy Joe Hobbs became the bass player in the McCoys. So we all of a sudden were able to play all kinds of music. We were able to play soul and jazz, and we liked blues. We listened to WLAC right here in Nashville, Tennessee. We had a clear channel in Ohio. It would bounce off the dome and come back down to us in Ohio, and we'd be able to listen to WLAC. So we played a lot of stuff like that. So when we were playing our music, we really looked at ourselves as an all-around really good. We wanted to be a good band. Mm-hmm. We wanted to play cool music that people liked. And so when Hang On Sloopy came around, the downside of the story is we were discovered because we were good enough to play that song with the producers that night. But when we actually recorded it, all of a sudden there were other bands popping up, and there was a whole genre that came along, and they were called bubblegum music. Yep. We didn't like that. The last thing we wanted to be considered was bubblegum music.
Yeah.
So we quickly turned down. One of the gentlemen here in the audience tonight recorded "Come On Down to My Boat, Baby." And he got that song. He probably doesn't know it. I think I told him. But he got that song probably because the McCoys turned it down.
Thanks.
We had all of a sudden we're being called a bubblegum band, and we said, we're not going to do another one of those songs. And we even took it to the extent where first opportunity we had, we left Bang Records, which had just given us 3 major hits and a career. We left Bang Records and busted out on our own and started making records for a company, Mercury Records at that time. And we made the farthest out music. It never became successful because it never had any opportunity of being commercial in any way. But it did lead me on the path that brought me in contact with Johnny Winter and then Edgar Winter. So in the end, I was able to shed that bubblegum image and became sidekick of Johnny Winter. In fact, Johnny Winter and was the name of the band. But in reality, the band was Johnny Winter, my brother Randy on drums, Randy Joe Hobbs from the McCoys on bass. So basically, we were Johnny Winter and the McCoys. But the record company said, well, you know, there's still that kind of bubblegum kind of thing that the McCoys has hanging over their head. I don't know if we can call it Johnny Winter and the McCoys. So somebody came up with the bright idea, because nobody came up with a great idea. They just said, well, we'll just drop the McCoys part and you'll be Johnny Winter and. So that's how we became Johnny Winter and, was because once again, the McCoys, that whole bubblegum thing was hanging over our heads, whether we liked it or not.
Such a big hit. Yeah.
But the rest of the McCoys were right there with Johnny Winter on that first album. My brother, who played drums, got ill later on touring in Britain, and he contracted an illness that doesn't allow him to play drums anymore. So we went ahead and got another drummer in the Johnny Winter band. But the original band was just the original McCoys, the 3 guys that that started out as the McCoys.
Yeah, and of course, rock and roll hoochie coo came out of that era.
That's another story. In Rock and Roll Hoochie Coo, it says there was a band called the Jokers. They were laying it down. Well, the Jokers was a band that when I said my dad would take me to jam to places where I probably wasn't old enough to get in, he would talk he would say, my son's really good, and you guys would probably like to hear him play. And can he come in and play? So one of the bands that he talked his way into was a band called the Jokers. And that's why I mentioned them in the song. But what people don't know is the Jokers included as their lead guitar player Dickie Betts. Dickie Betts was the lead guitar player in the Jokers at that time. So the other band, the Jokers, was kind of the rock band that I liked a lot as a kid. But there was another band called the Twilighters, and the Twilighters played soul music. So I'm talking about them in another song that I'm writing right now. The Twilighters played soul, so I'm talking about them. You mentioned the Jokers, the Twilighters deserve to be mentioned too.
Now, I know that you had told me before the show that you had injured your hand a little bit.
Yeah,
and so
we just moved to a new house, and so in the moving process, I'm building cabinets and doing things, and a board snapped shut on my index finger, and the little sore, it's hardly visible anymore because it's now about a week later, but it happens to be right where you slide a string.
Yeah.
So I can't do too much playing, but we'll do a little playing. You guys heard me a little bit warming up before, but I can't really.
If you could play us a little something, just to let us hear how that guitar sounds. Now you're tuned down. So, what do you?
Yeah, this guitar is tuned down to D.
Down to D.
A full step down.
Yep.
And I do that for a couple different reasons. I like it. I like the sound of it.
So all of your guitars are tuned down, or just that
right now? They're all tuned down to D.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we can let's go into detail about this. This is tuned to D. In reality, my guitars are not at 440. My guitars are at 444. Okay. And if you study biblically, they believe that before there was any standards creating 440, when they said David cured people with the sound of his harp, there are some people that want to believe that it was probably tuned in that kind of a tuning. Now, scientifically, they've found that everything in the universe vibrates. Chlorophyll, for instance, vibrates at 532 cycles. Well, if you take 532 cycles, that is C above middle C.
Okay.
And if you take that 532 cycles as C above middle C, and you translate that to what would A be, which is where we always tune A 440, A 440. Well, A then becomes 444. So there's a lot of discussion about, is it 432 or 444? Well, I actually have tried both tunings, and 432 doesn't sound right to me. It sounds dull and lifeless. It's flat, if we're all used to hearing 440.
Yeah.
But 444 just sounds like it has more life and vibrancy. And here's another thing. 440, why did we establish 440 as our tuning center? Well, during World War II, Goebbels, one of the big German characters, we'll call him, he wanted to learn how to use sound in war. He wanted to use sound in war. And so they were doing all these kind of experiments and stuff, and they found actually that 440 made people agitated. And I don't know if they used it for that as such, but somewhere along the line, I think it was the Rothschilds and maybe Rockefeller or somebody went to the Bureau of Standards, I believe it's called, and that was in Britain. It's probably still in Britain, the Bureau of Standards. And they made their case that A should be 440. Well, these people, in the end, that I just mentioned their names, they're not necessarily what we'd call good guys as opposed to good guys and bad guys.
Yeah.
In some people's frame of reference, they might be the black hats, and I want to be the white hat.
Yeah.
So their idea of controlling and it wasn't shortly after that we saw, Beatles playing music and kids screaming and yelling and, and going crazy. So maybe 440 has something to do with that agitation. All I know is 444, because you're in tune with the universe, we'll call it, seems to make people calm. If you're in a band and you're all tuned at 444, they tell me that people in the band get along better. So there's a lot of reasons why I'm actually 4 cents up. Now this guitar isn't, and the good news is you can tune at 444 and play with your friends and they're tuned at 440 and they won't even know. It's such a slight difference that they won't even know you're at 444. Yeah. But yeah, so I tune down to D, but I'm also normally at pitch center 444.
Now tell us a little bit about that. That's one of the guitars that that is part of this. Tell us about this instrument.
Well, when I was in the McCoys, one of my favorite. Well, when I got the opportunity to get the guitar I wanted, really, I bought an ES355 TD. It was called, and ES355 is the designation which has a knob with a veritone, and it also originally had a stereo output. And the TD designation just means it's not stereo and doesn't necessarily have that veritone switch. But I got one of those guitars, and that's the guitar I'm playing on Hang On Sloopy, as a matter of fact. Just like this guitar right here. But somewhere along the line, that guitar was stolen. So this gentleman right over here that sang Come On Down to My Boat Baby actually appeared in my life at some point, and he had a guitar that was very similar to that, and I was able to acquire it from him. And that's the guitar I used all during the White Trash era. All those records that I played on with Edgar Winter and White Trash, that's the particular guitar I was playing. And that guitar was like, I call them the Holy Grails. when you find a guitar that's just perfect, you've found the Holy Grail.
Yeah.
We have a lot of guitars here, and every one of them, to individual players, they might pick it up and say, man, this is the Holy Grail for me. But that particular guitar I got from him was the Holy Grail for me. That guitar played so good. It just, I mean, you can hear, I mean, how can I play that good on those, on that Roadwork album? Those rhythm parts are, I can't play that fast anymore. I can't. Well, half of it comes because that guitar was the Holy Grail. That guitar was great. Yeah. So once again, what happened to that guitar? It was stolen too.
Oh, God.
So somewhere along the line, the Gibson Custom Shop made this one for me.
Gorgeous.
Because my original one had a Bigsby. It had a Gibson vibrato on it, and they had 2 holes here because I took that funky Gibson vibrato off, and I had a Bigsby put on. So the Gibson Custom Shop actually put a plaque there for me. In those days, they put the Bigsby on for me, and they put a plaque to cover up those 2 holes, and it just says custom made, I think. Yeah, custom made is all it says. So this guitar here is a guitar I had made at the Gibson Custom Shop to recreate those 2 guitars, and one of them was the Holy Grail. But this guitar right here, I played, it has a Chet Atkins vibrato arm on it. I'm a big Chet fan. That vibrato arm is just smooth. You find out why Chet loved it when you play this guitar and use that vibrato. It's just a smooth vibrato. And I'm sure the normal Bigsby arm does a similar thing. But the reason Chet had this one made was because he doesn't have to reach back there for it. He can get it right here. But it also, just because it's longer, it seems to work smoother. But this one is the one I played all during Ringo Starr's tours. I played with the Ringo Starr All-Star Band for about 3 years.
Yeah.
And we played all over the world, all over Europe and Russia and South America and all over the United States. 3 years
was that?
worth
That
of,
was about the 90s when you were doing that?
it was, he's about 78 now. I played this on stage with him during his 70th birthday party at Radio City Music Hall. So it must have only been about 7 years ago or so, something like that.
And what was it like playing in that band?
Oh, Ringo is a great guy. I've had the opportunity to meet Ringo and Paul. Ringo's a little more grumpy than Paul. I got to tell you that. That happens to be the truth. Ringo's a little grumpy. And part of his grumpiness with me was I'm an unabashed Christian. Ringo's a Buddhist. He, with all those Maharishis and all that stuff in the Beatles past, he's one of those characters. And I don't mind praying before I eat, for instance. And Ringo would find that uncomfortable, seeing me pray over food. And I think that's part of why he was a little grumpier with me. He came up to me one day on stage at a sound check, and he's walking past me, and he just turned to me and he said, "So whose God is it anyway?" And I didn't really know how to respond to it. Really. I said, yours, mine. I mean, the God I believe in is for everybody. I mean, he doesn't choose sides. And Ringo just kind of strutted off. I don't know if he liked that response or not. He didn't have a retort for it at all. But if you go in Ringo's house, for instance, in England, one of the first things you see is this big, huge golden Buddha statue. And so, and every time you take a picture with Ringo, you have to do that. You have to do that. That's a rule with Ringo. You can't take a picture with Ringo unless you do that. Well, in my life, I'm starting to look at that. Those are devil horns. I'm not totally happy with that. But so Ringo, I'm doing that. So you have to put up with me praying before I eat. But those are some Ringo stories that people probably don't always want to hear. But Paul turned out to be the nicest guy. I played at Ringo's 70th birthday party, like I said, at Radio City Music Hall, and played this guitar. And I also played this one back here, this Les Paul here. I have a photo, I believe we have it online here, of me with both Paul and Ringo both. And I'm playing that guitar right there.
Wow.
So that was a great experience. Paul surprised Ringo. People think, I would just naturally thought, they had this great relationship in the Beatles, so they must be like close buds. They must hang together, or call each other all the time, or whatever. And I never thought, they're just like any other band. When they break up, it doesn't necessarily mean they have that relationship ongoing. So Paul surprised Ringo. He came to our sound check. We knew about it. We were told to be at sound check, and that Paul was going to come, and we were going to rehearse whatever he would play with Ringo that night. And but we were told to not tell Ringo. So it really was a surprise. We played, they say it's your birthday, happy birthday to you. And Ringo was so moved afterwards. He came out and hugged Paul, and he was moved to tears, and he was really very thankful that Paul showed up. So that particular concert, I played this guitar, and I played that guitar while playing with Paul and Ringo both. So both of these guitars are not only good guitars, but they have those kind of significant histories.
Incredible. Jerome Hebert is asking online, I know, does Rick ever play acoustic, or are you mainly playing electric? I know you're known for playing electric, but do you play acoustic sometimes?
I do play acoustic, and I've written a lot of songs on acoustic. I do a series, some of my concerts are called, we call them storybook shows. And during those shows, I pretty much just play acoustic, and I play the songs that everybody knows, and we talk about where the songs came from and stories around them, and some lurid details that I save for those particular instances. But I usually play acoustic guitars. But a normal acoustic guitar, to me, after a few minutes, my fingers get so sore. I've played electric guitar my whole life, but I've always played electric guitar mainly. And unless I'm writing on an acoustic guitar, playing an acoustic guitar for a whole performance really makes my fingers sore. So I've been searching and searching and searching for all kinds of ways to simulate acoustic guitars and still feel like I'm playing this guitar. Right now I'm playing a Gibson Chet Atkins Celebrity model from 1992. And this particular one was one of the first attempts at trying to do that. And it comes pretty close, but it's easy to play. And the one I have was one of only 200 that they made. It was called the Celebrity Edition of that particular guitar, and I have one of those. So it looks really cool. And to me, half of playing guitar is looking cool.
Well, you've had such an amazing career. I mean, the deeper I got into your bio, the more incredible it was. You've toured with the Rolling Stones. You played with, Cyndi Lauper and
discovered Cyndi.
Kiss. Tell us about your relationship with her.
I was living in Manhattan, which was half. You got your foot in the door right away in all kinds of musical areas. Just living in Manhattan, like people here in Nashville, they probably feel the same way. But if you live in Manhattan, you know, I got called for sessions. That's how I ended up playing on all Steely Dan's records and
with
stuff.
Donald Fagen. And
but somewhere along the line, somebody came to me. A good friend of mine was a press agent, and they were doing PR for a band called Blue Angel. They said, well, Blue Angel's losing their record deal. Would you mind like doing a demo with them to try to give them a little boost, and maybe we can revive their deal rather than losing it. Maybe they can get it back. So I went ahead and I did a demo with Blue Angel They said, we still don't like Blue Angel, but we like their singer. And we'd like to sign her to a deal. Well, that turned out to be Cyndi Lauper.
Cyndi Lauper, yeah.
So then Cyndi was having trouble on one of her first major tours with her guitar player. It was a guy from Canada. Wish I could remember his name because I'd call him out right now. But she was having trouble with him. So she called me up after just several shows and she said, could you come out? Because I can't take this guy for whatever reasons. Would you mind joining us on the road? And so I went out with literally no rehearsals or anything and started playing with them. And I continued playing through that particular tour, which was a worldwide tour. There's a pretty cool video of us in Paris playing a concert, Cyndi Lauper live in Paris. And I got big hair in those days. Big hair. Big hair was in the hairband days.
That's right.
And my hair was big too. So. Yeah. But you can see that. I love Cyndi. But I also discovered other people. I discovered Weird Al Yankovic.
That's right. That's right. And you produced Eat It.
Eat It. I produced his first 6 albums.
And of which you won a Grammy for
2
best,
Grammys.
2 Grammys for Best
Weird
Comedy
Al.
Album. Yeah.
One was Best Comedy Album, and one was Best Album, or whatever. One was Best Comedy Song, one was Best Album. I don't know how they're divided up, but we won one year and one the next year. Eat It and Who's Fat.
That's right. Yeah.
But Weird Al was a cool thing. He had come through. My manager at that time was a co-writer of the song called "I Love Rock and Roll," and when a guy does a parody of the song, if he wants paid for his particular share, he has to go to the original writer and get permission. Can I get permission to collect? You'll get your share because you wrote, but I wrote the words. Can I get permission to collect for the words? And it turns out he came to my manager at that time that wrote "I Love Rock and Roll," and he said, "I want to do a song. I want to do your song, and I'm going to call it "I Love Rocky Road." And so my manager called me up. He said, "I want you to come in and hear this guy and see what you think." Well, one of the big mainstays when I was growing up, my parents had a bunch of 78 records, and a whole bunch of them were by Spike Jones.
That's right. Yeah.
And Spike Jones was a novelty artist, we would call him now. He had a great band and stuff, but he did stuff that was kind of funny music, funny stuff. And then along the line, there came other novelty artists over the years, and I noticed that when a novelty artist is out there, they don't have any competition because there's always only one at a time. So I said, does this guy Al have any other songs? Well, he went ahead and played me a few more. I said, hey, we don't want to do one song. We want to do a whole album. So I went ahead and with my own penny, went ahead and got the recording studio. He's in Hollywood. So I got the studio out there, and we went ahead and made an album with no record company because I had confidence in Weird Al. And I had a pretty good production career going at that time. I'd produced all of Johnny Winter's records that were gold or platinum. Yeah. I'd produced Edgar Winter's records that were gold or platinum. I'd done these demos for people like Cyndi, and they all turned out to be effective stuff. So I said, if I can find an artist, one more artist to really hit it big, I'm going to put the feather in my producer cap. This is going to be great. And I saw Weird Al as that feather in my producer cap. So we put out the album, and sure enough, the first song was Eat It. Well, it wasn't the first song, but Eat It went, well, maybe it was the first single. But it went to #1 and made that album a huge platinum selling album. And then the next album we did Who's Fat? And that became one of the biggest videos on MTV in those days. And also a big, huge selling record. So I thought, wow, this is it, man, I've made it as a producer. And so all of a sudden, I started, rather than getting more people coming to ask me to be a producer, I started getting less people. And I said, well, what's this all about? And all of a sudden somebody told me, well, now you are a novelty producer. I said, what? I didn't even know there was such a designation. They said, no, you're a novelty producer. These people are novelties, and you now produce a novelty, so you're called a novelty producer. And I said, well, that's not good. That's not good. So Weird Al, although pays a lot of good bills today for me, he turned out to pretty much end my production career. But some cool things came out of it. I got to meet Michael Jackson. When you do Eat It and you do Who's Fat, those are both big Michael Jackson songs. When you think about it, Michael Jackson is known to be a kind of a quirky guy. And so he went, I like this Weird Al guy. And so Michael Jackson would call up Weird Al in the middle of the night. Al said he wouldn't know when to expect Michael Jackson to call, but Michael would call up and he'd say, hello, Al, it's Michael. And Al said he could just picture Michael sitting there with the monkey on his knee. And the whole thing makes sense. The whole picture makes sense, Weird Al being that kind of guy. So he became such a fan that when we did Who's Fat, he actually talked to his producer, Quincy Jones.
Quincy, yeah.
One of my favorite producers there ever, that walks the face of the earth. He said, can we help Al? So Quincy Jones actually sent us his programs, his computer programs that he used for the keyboards and stuff. He sent them over to our studio, so we were able to use them on Who's Fat.
Wow.
Quincy Jones programs. So you never know. These doors open and close and things happen and life just moves on. But
that's right.
Weird Al's certainly one of my greatest achievements in my book.
And I know recently, well, not within the last few years, you keep creating different things, and now you have done a smooth jazz project of several years back, and that has done real well.
Yeah, my smooth jazz album was called Free Ride, and there's always an upside to my life and a downside. The upside is it turned out to be a pretty successful record. One of the songs, called Hot and Cool, was on the smooth jazz charts in the top 10 for 6 months, I want to say.
Wow.
It was good. The downside is it was the end of the smooth jazz era. So the smooth jazz stations were fading, and now you have a hard time finding a smooth jazz radio station anymore.
Yeah.
So I didn't end up doing many more of those records. But on that record, that's the guitar right there.
The red one.
That red Trig D'Angelico right there.
Gorgeous.
Is the guitar that was played on the whole record. I didn't play any other guitars on that record because I really wanted to be somehow honest and true to what I was doing. I'm doing jazz. It's called, whether it's smooth jazz or not, it's called jazz. And I think I even had flat wound strings on it to play that whole record. So that's the guitar. And when you play like a guitar like this without hearing it through the amp, it's very quiet. It doesn't have much sound. But this guy right here, a lot of sound comes off that guitar. It's a fabulous sounding guitar. The story goes, it doesn't say D'Angelico on the top. It says Triggs. Yep. Well, the story goes that when D'Angelico died, the family actually sought out who is the luthier that can carry on this tradition. And they found Jim Triggs. And they hired him, I heard, to make 8 guitars. Jim Triggs tells me that it might have only been 3 because he doesn't even, he cranks out guitars. He doesn't even have an exact recollection. But this is one of those that he was able to use, as far as I heard, the actual drawings and specs and things that came from D'Angelico himself to create those few guitars that he made. This is one of them, but this is the only one that he ever did in that clear red finish. Yeah. Which, once again, if you're going to play guitar, you want to look cool.
That's that's right. Give us a quick rundown of some of the other instruments that you have over there.
Okay. Like I said, that one was Out With Me and Ringo, and then you got the pictures of me playing that with Ringo and Paul, like this one with Ringo. That one's the only guitar on the Smooth Jazz record. That guitar, that next one, that's a 65 Strat, and it looks pretty beat up because I played it a lot for a while. It was on the road with me all during the Derringer band.
Yeah.
With Danny Johnson, and who went ahead to play with Steppenwolf for the last almost 30 years, I think. But Danny Johnson was in the band, and Vinny Appice, Carmine's little brother, was in the band called Derringer, Kenny Aronson. And that guitar was the one I played a lot on the road with them. I ended up tuning it in an open tuning that I learned from Johnny Winter. He calls it an open G, but it's the tuning I used on the song called Sitting by the Pool. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the Derringer fans really like that song, Sitting by the Pool. I like the song, Sitting by the Pool. And that's the song, that's the guitar that you hear in that whole riff. Da-da-da-dum, da-da-da-dum, da-dum. That's that guitar right there. And so that one has that history. You can see it on the inside cover of Derringer Live, the fold out there. I'm playing that guitar on that picture. And that is that guitar. And since I mentioned Danny, that next one in row here is a 1957 Les Paul TV special.
Yeah.
And Danny Johnson, when he was in my band, played a guitar. His personal guitar was like that one. It wasn't as old as that one, but it was like that one. And so we may have used that as actually a backup in case he broke a string or something like that. But it has very little abuse. It's in great shape. And once again, that's 1957. That's a long time ago for me, even me. That's the year after I started playing guitar. So that's wow.
And what about the brightly colored one next to it?
The brightly colored one next to it is one that you can find them occasionally on the internet. What it is a hand-painted replica of the one that the Beatles played on the roof, I think, when they were playing.
Yeah.
It was cold out there, and they did that concert on the roof. I think that was one of the guitars George played at that time. But it was, I think, originally, maybe George even painted it. I'm not sure about the original story. And this is a recreation of that. It's a really nice playing guitar, but once again, I can't keep all my guitars, and that is probably one of the more affordable of this batch of guitars right here. The next one in line over there is a 1966 Stratocaster. I've had that for about 20 years. And the reason it looks so unplayed is I'm afraid to play it. We've all heard stories about, somebody putting a guitar under their bed and they discovered it years later and all that stuff. Well, it turns out a lady, her husband played Stratocasters, and she wanted to give him a gift. And so she bought him 2 Stratocasters. And literally the one he played was the one, that got a lot of use. But the other one was literally pushed under a bed and stowed away until I discovered it, till I found it. So that guitar right there is the closest thing, about the closest thing you're going to find to a brand new 1966 Stratocaster. It has very little play, and like I said, in order to preserve that, I haven't hardly played it at all. It's worth a lot of money, but in the end, I actually told the guys here at Gruen, if it doesn't sell, I will keep that guitar and I'll probably start playing it because it's just a perfect, it's not a version of a 1966. Jimi Hendrix, who was a friend of mine, loved that big headstock. That big headstock came out in 1966, and there it is. A 1966 perfect Stratocaster with the Jimi Hendrix size headstock on it.
Wow. Anybody out here have a question? Yes, sir.
All American Boy, did you play Fender all the way through, or was it mixed up with
I played a bunch of different guitars. I did play a Strat on some of it. I had a blonde Strat with a blonde neck that I played on some of that, and I did play acoustic on some of it. I played a Les Paul on some of it. Interesting Les Paul story, if we got time for it. I bought an old beat-up Dan Armstrong's guitar shop in Greenwich Village in New York City. I found a beat-up Les Paul, and it was a gold top, but it was so beat up, it just looked horrible. But it played so good. I fell in love with this guitar, and I bought it. I took it home to where my family lived in Indiana, and my dad saw it, and he said, "Well, Rick, you like that guitar so much, we should take it up there to Gibson in Kalamazoo and have them put a pretty finish on it for you." And like a stupido, I said, "Okay, let's do that." So in the end, I took it up there to them, and they refinished it in SG cherry red, clear cherry. And when I got it back, it looked beautiful. But to me, it just never played the same at all.
Yeah.
In fact, I don't even know in reality that they didn't switch guitars on me, but I won't go there. But the bottom line is it didn't play, I didn't like it at all anymore. So I took it back to the store where I bought it originally as a beat-up guitar. Originally came from John Sebastian, as a matter of fact, was the original owner. And I took it back to the store, and I picked out a nice cherry sunburst Les Paul that he had, and it played better, and I loved that one, and hung that up on the wall. Well, the next week, Eric Clapton came into that same store, and he bought that cherry sunburst Les Paul that I thought was a dog, and he went ahead, took it to England, and played it While My Guitar Gently Weeps. He played that guitar on While My Guitar Gently Weeps, and then afterwards he said, "George, I want to present you with this guitar," which affirms my feeling that it was a dog. He didn't like it either. He gave it to George. And then that's the famous one that you can see in the Gibson catalog. They show pictures of it. George had it stolen, and he had to go to Mexico and buy it back from the people. Now, here's the side note. If you go in that Gibson catalog where they show the picture of it, it shows, because it's clear red, it shows like a knot in the wood up here somewhere. And in my recollection, there was not a knot in the wood. So I'm going, did these guys then switch guitars on him in Mexico?
Thank you so much for being part of just an amazing time of going through your career. I have one last question for you. You have had such an amazing career as a musician.
Yep.
You've done things from when you're a teen. You're
Yep.
still active doing
Yep.
things, still doing concerts.
Praise God.
You've done rock, you've done blues stuff, you've toured the world. But as a musician, that is different from how do you see that different as being a star?
On these awards shows they have nowadays, in my estimation, it's vulgar what they present to our very unfortunate kids.
Yeah, the younger players coming up. Yeah.
And not only the players, but the audience. I mean, some of these, I mean, I don't even want to go into it. But a star is something that plays like God. I played that game. I was there. I did all that. But I've grown to know that that's has no relevance in the giant scheme of things. What we want to be is a star. After we die, we want to be a star. Here,
Yeah.
doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That stuff's nonsense.
Yeah.
There you have it.
Yeah. Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Once again. What a joy.
Thank you. I have a video out called, Rick Derringer's Rock Guitar Secrets.
Yeah.
And a book that went along with it a long time ago. And currently, I'm trying to figure out how to stream some of that on my Patreon site. I've created a Patreon site where I'm putting up videos and family things and music. And what I'm going to try to do in the future is actually, when I create a new song, I'm going to try to create a little video that goes along with it and put
Great.
it on that Patreon site
Wonderful.
rather than even trying to sell records and
Wonderful.
stuff. We're kind of in a new era
Yeah.
now. So I'm plugging my Rick Derringer Patreon website.
Good. And you can get all the information about Rick at rickderringer.com. Tour dates and concert dates and things like that. Please catch him if he happens to be in your area. Thank you so much for being here with us. We've
Thank
had
you.
just such a great time.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you again.
Keep up the great work in your own learning, and we will see you guys next time.